So 3,
Oh no.
2, 1.
Get off your phone.
Oh, hang on. There's another button.
I'm gonna do a watch party.
Oh no.
Cool.
Oh no.
I should do a watch party. A party.
You're live, bro.
We're live.
You're live.
I'm live.
Am I live? Are you live?
Joe.
We're live.
My name is
We got
Joe.
thumbs up
I'm
behind
gonna
us.
call you Joe. Well, this is fun. Finally, Mr. Ruby and Mrs. Ruby, John and Vikki are here with me.
How you doing?
I am so excited for this conversation. We've had some kombucha.
Cheers, mate. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. I got the mango.
I got the raspberry, and it is fabulous. And we're going to have a conversation about life and also about the journey that you guys have been on. Of course, I've been on the same similar journey as you, Vikki, so it's going to be really fun. We're going to have John as the official expert practitioner, which is kind of scary.
Oh no.
Expert.
That's going right to his head.
An expert. You know what a definition of an expert is?
Just tell us, please.
An X is a has-been, and a spurt is a drip under pressure. So
Ooh, don't drip under
Yeah,
pressure,
yeah.
please.
I
And you're
don't-
not a has-been.
okay.
You're a husband.
Okay.
Ooh,
Thank you. Yes.
I'm a rapper. But you and I have been, connected for a long time. I still remember, as it was yesterday, when you used to bring your guys to the church. I was young adult every Tuesday night.
We bring
Remember?
a crew, eh? We roll with 20 deep.
20 deep.
Yeah,
We used
yeah.
to bring your guys. And also, every so often, I do have a very memorable encounter where I had to bring somebody to you.
Yeah, you came to the treatment center, and yeah, it was an interesting
It was
hour
was-
or half hour.
Well,
Yeah,
half
it was
hour.
memorable.
For you,
I think
might
you
have
had an
been.
overnight
Yes.
of memories, and you came in the tail end of that. So
yes, 24
Yeah.
hours of great
Yeah.
memories.
Yeah.
But it was fun because we built not much of it wasn't a deep relationship per se, but we got to know each other.
yeah.
And it was
It was
later.
like we're ministry friends.
Yeah.
Like we see each other here and there, and
and
say,
so
"Hey, what's up?" And you always remembered my name, so I was like, "Yeah, I like you."
It's a good trait.
It's a good
Yeah.
trait to remember someone's name. Thank God you were big. That's why. I just thought, better remember this guy's name.
Just called me fat on live TV here.
I did not.
Man, I'm leaving.
Uncle, you can walk out. We'll deal. Vikki and I can handle this.
All right, yeah. I thought it was the conversation's about Vikki, isn't it?
Well, it is,
Isn't
but
it
I
with
want to
Vikki?
introduce
Not
you
about
guys
Vikki, but
because
with Vikki.
people want
Oh, okay,
context.
okay.
Context is important.
I'm
So I
Jo-
just wanted to know
I'm
how
John,
I met you.
Joe's friend.
But so the way we met is, so we were, we knew each other, but then I went through my burnout, and I didn't really want to do, I didn't want to talk to anybody. I was minding my own business.
Spiritual
and then,
experience, right?
Yes, and then one day, my wife went to this women gathering.
It was small.
was
There was
small.
just a couple of us.
A few of you guys, but then she blurted out that I was going through.
She didn't blurt it out.
She told everybody what I was going through. And Lord behold, I get a call from John. And John's like, yo.
I sicked John on you.
Yes. John's like, yo. And at that point, I was not ready for a conversation.
No, I remember setting up a little coffee date. Like it's like, hey, do you want to meet me at the local coffee shop? And you're like, yeah, sure. So I book it in my calendar and I show up there, and he didn't show up. And I was like, man, he's sick. So then the next date, I said, like, there's lunch involved, maybe some tacos, and showed up to that one.
I did show up
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
tacos.
And we've had good conversations, and
Yeah.
we've been doing stuff together for a few years.
few years now.
Yeah,
Yeah. And Life Lab was incredible. It was like, for me anyways, it was transformational because it was an opportunity to do work on some of the, stuff that I was carrying at the time. Lots of bitterness, lots of resentment, and all that fun
Yeah,
stuff.
just a motivator of switching tracks, right? Getting
Correct.
on a new track.
Yeah.
Getting a new mindset. Pointing in a new direction.
Well, it was good. It was, and both my wife and I did that. And so that was really, how many people have gone through that program thus far?
The in-person version,
Yeah.
probably, I think it was 120 so
Wow.
far.
That's so cool.
Since we started, I think we've run 3 years of it. 3 full years,
Wow.
I believe, right?
Yeah, so six
semesters.
I think.
And then we
Amazing.
have it online as well.
Wow. And
Online school, man, that's a big
Online
deal now,
school.
eh?
Yeah, it's a
Online
big
school,
deal.
it's like, man, that's where it's at.
this is where it's at. So you guys been doing that, and then COVID hit, and everything changed, and no more church. Well,
No. Everything changed for me before COVID even
Okay.
hit.
Wow.
So
Yeah, back up the truck. Oh, we're getting right into it. But there's no introduction
There's no
for Vikki. Like
introduction.
you're going hard to the hole.
Well,
yeah.
Vikki, I mean, you went through a transition, so you worked on Parliament Hill for an MP.
15 years.
15 years
And then got fired.
and got fired.
No, I did not get fired. I have never been fired from a job.
See what I did there?
That's a
I know how to
dig.
set hooks.
That's a dig right there. John, how many jobs have you been fired
Hey,
from?
It's not about. So the mango booch has been a highlight of the summer. Where were we? I won't set any more
Yeah.
hooks. I apologize.
No, wait, what? You have to ask me a question.
Well, so you were 15
Have you ever
years,
been fired?
15
No.
years in government,
Yeah.
and then transitioned
15
out.
years working for an MP, and then when an MP you work for the MP, so he was not running in the last election, and so I knew my job would come to an end. I had lots of warning, and really felt like it was a good time for me to take some time off and have a joyous year. At one point, I called it's like the year of Jubilee, which just sounds like a celebration year, and but I knew that it would be harder. I knew it would be harder than that. I knew.
Man, looking back at that whole concept of the year of Jubilee, it's like, yeah, that's really what it is.
Yeah.
You were just saying it's like, yeah, I'm gonna let my hair blow back, and we're gonna go on holidays for a year, and life is gonna be good. But
Yeah, no.
the reality of Jubilee is actually restoration and rest and re-nourishing.
Yeah.
That's good.
And so,
So I was really aware, I was very aware that I was in exhaustion, and that I wasn't functioning normally. Like John at one point made a joke that I had have a thimble of capacity, and which is not like me. I can usually go pretty hard, but I can't go mid. And so when things slowed down, I didn't know how to function. I didn't know how to. Yeah. And so I just really, I knew that I needed to work on some stuff. And I think probably I could have just said I'm in burnout. I didn't have that language, but I just said I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted. I've been going hard. I've never taken time off work. I've worked since I was 15. I, lived with an addict for 13 of those years, and then threw myself into serving and worked really hard, and I volunteered in lots of places and did lots of things and kept myself really busy, which I realize now just really kept me distracted. And I can go that way. It's so tempting even right now. So I thought I was taking a year off. I didn't realize that everybody else was going to join me in March. I'm like, no, wait
Vikki's
a minute.
got this nice condo on the beach looking out, and then everybody else is
And now
with her.
everybody
the
else
next
is
day,
home.
like, hey, what's for dinner?
Go to school, go to work, go somewhere else.
Wow.
Don't be here. I want to be alone. But yeah, it's been a really good.
So let's talk a little bit about that journey, because that's why we're here. Everybody's breathing now.
Everybody take a deep breath, crack your back.
But
And it's fresh, right? It's
Yeah,
still very new.
yeah.
It's Go. I don't need to talk.
Yeah, I think the journey for me has really been, we've talked a lot about our story. We've talked a lot about John's addiction and his journey into recovery. And I've always been alongside. And I kind of would joke about, I followed him into addiction, and then I followed him into recovery, and I followed him into church, and I followed him all over. And I never really realized, I don't think, what that really meant. And I thought that I did really well. Like I had done a lot of things to learn and to grow and to learn about myself and to heal. I knew that it was really important that I forgive him for lots of things. And I knew that it was really important to reestablish our marriage and get rid of resentment and, all those things that we teach in Life Lab. And I did Life Lab 6 times because we've done 6 classes. And every time I would learn more, but I was always distracted. So I was always working. I was always doing other things, and I never sat still.
You never got to see the problem. And
Right.
so I think sometimes a lot of the things are a solution, but if I don't know what the problem is, and it's like, if I know that I have a light on my dashboard and I look it up and it's coolant. And so then I go to a store and get this thing called coolant. And if I don't know where to put it in, I might have the right solution, but I don't know where to put it. And I could actually cause more damage if I'm trying to put the solution in other things. So I think that's an eye opener to somebody like with me as an alcoholic, as somebody that has a substance abuse problem. It's easy to see like it's all physical. You're actually consuming something and your life is unmanageable and you have no power. And so it's super easy to go like, okay, you have a spiritual problem. Let's put a spiritual solution in. So I think that's when you lose your job or when you have space, then the problem is there and then it percolates up.
Absolutely.
And my problem has always been me. And so that's it's a little bit more challenging. And I've been dismissive many times in the past of like, stop, I'd say to John, like, oh, don't make such a big deal. It's not such a big deal. But my indicator light is that I get irritable, I'll get snippy, if I'm under too much pressure. And so for me, I blamed a stressful job. I have a very, important stressful job on Parliament Hill. I do all this service work and, we're hardly ever home. I'm out every night serving. And so I'm just tired. And before that, it was, I was living with an addict. And so when my job came to an end and we had done a real good financial coaching plan about 9-10 years ago. And so we've got to this place for 2020. Well, my job ended in 2019. We had, money saved up so that I could take a year off work. We have no financial worries. I have no job. Church is fine. Like church doesn't need me. I can step away, no problem. And here I am taking this year off work, but I'm not okay. I'm irritable. I'm discontent. I'm, snippy. I'm reacting to him constantly. And he kept saying like, what is going on with you? Like, I think you're still angry with me. I think you resent me. Like the way that you're treating me, like you don't treat anybody else like this. And I would just put it back on him. Like, well,
But what were some other symptoms too? Like even like your own self-care and nail biting and sleeplessness.
So for me, like the thimbleful of capacity thing was kind of a joke, but it was reality where I used to be so good at paperwork. I'd be really good at paperwork and organization and administrative stuff. And I just couldn't figure it out. I would say to my friend, like, I don't understand what's happening. Like paperwork was so easy for me. What is going on? She'd say, oh, you're just exhausted. You just need to rest. And then I would rest and I would be irritable. And I'm like, my life is great. It's literally the best it's ever been. I have an adult child who lives at home, but he's great to live with. He's like living with like the perfect roommate. He cleans up the dishes and pays rent. And for me, I just could not turn off my head. I couldn't stop overthinking. I couldn't stop being anxious. I would list things in my head all the time. So I would list all the problems. But if I told you the problems, I would even tell you like, well, it's not even that big of a deal. I'd say that it's really not a big deal. It's just the accumulation of everything is too much for me. But really it wasn't too much for me. Like it really wasn't a problem. The problem was I couldn't turn off my brain.
Wow.
And so I actually physically could feel anxiety coursing through my body at one point. And we had started really looking. And so John has always done the 12 steps. When he went into recovery, we started going, I went to meetings 16 years ago. I went to a lot of like Al-Anon and family groups and like AA family groups. We went to an AA open meeting for 3 years together. And I remember when we went there, I became so convinced that I was an alcoholic. I'm like, this all applies to me. I'm an alcoholic. I have all these bad drinking stories because I would try to keep up with that guy. You don't want to try to keep up drinking with that guy. And of course I couldn't handle that amount of liquor. And so I had bad drinking stories. And so I was telling all these people at this AA meeting, I'm an alcoholic. And they asked me a bunch of questions, which I know now is called qualifying. So they ask you all these questions and they're like, are you really an alcoholic? well, no, because if I had like a big day tomorrow, I'm not going to go drinking.
Yeah, she just shuts it down at 10 o'clock. Like, oh, and I have 3 drinks and I get tired.
I'm tired.
Or
I got to go home
full.
to bed
I'm
now.
full. I can only have 1 drink of wine. And I'm like,
My dinner was too big.
nope, you're not. You're dequalified.
So they're like, no, you're not an alcoholic. I'm like, darn.
But I have all these issues.
But this program really makes sense to me, and I need what you people have.
Yeah.
Like the people in this room, you guys have something that I want. And so we went there for about 3 years, and I learned tons of stuff and carried a lot of it forward. But I didn't ever actually like sit down and do the work that they talk about in AA. And then was like really self-righteous and dismissive of like, well, I'm not like them. And, you know, yeah, you guys have to do that hard work because you have this like life-threatening disease. Your addiction could kill you. You know, I just might be a little bit hard to be around. That's all. You know, at my worst, I'm just hard to be around.
Yeah.
Which is so ridiculous. Who wants to be that person that for the rest of my life I'm hard to be around? You know, like I know people who have said to me like, I don't understand why I have no friends. I just can't connect with people, and I have so much compassion for them, but I'm not close enough or willing to tell them like, hey, you're really hard to be around. So I had John who was like, hey, you're really hard to be around. You need to do something different. And that's what this year has really been about. And I think it was significant for me because I think a lot of times I just want to be angry with him. And then, you know, even this morning I was just reminded about how grateful I am because I think a lot of husbands faced with what John had to deal with from me this year would have just pulled away emotionally, you know, oftentimes physically, would have just pulled away, given me all the space that I wanted. I wanted space. Like I will be super prickly so that you'll just leave me alone. And he won't just leave me alone. He loves me and I'm in like his best friend and literally the only person that he wants to hang out with 24/7. And he's just like, can't you just...
I'm just going to say that's an exaggeration, but like, you know.
No. If I leave
I like
the
going
house,
to get Starbucks with Joe. Like, come on. I'm diverse, man. I got friends.
no offense, Joe, but when he goes to Starbucks with you, he wants me to come.
It's okay. I get it. I get it. I'm not offended. That's all.
We should talk about the problem.
Yeah.
I like this part.
I
of
don't
the
want to
story.
talk about my relationship with John at all.
Because you set the stage, and so what's the real problem?
Yeah.
So when you look at the alcoholic or the crackhead or anybody with substance abuse, you're like, you know their problem, but do they? And so this is where the controversy comes in, because I could say that the last time that I drank and did drugs was not my choice. And then everybody's like, well, you make your bed, you sleep in it. You have the choice. You can go get help.
Yeah.
And so those are actually what we've learned is that I have a problem that you don't. And so you can drink a little bit and you could do some extracurricular activities, but why can't I do it? And so that's what the real problem is when I do it. And to sum it up is once I start, I can't stop. And once I stop, I can't stop starting. So that's where my life becomes unmanageable, and I have no power in my life to choose whether I drink or not. And so when we apply the 12 steps, step 1 is I'm powerless and my life is unmanageable. Why? And so when I put this substance in my body, I have an abnormal reaction to it, and there's a lot of science behind it, but my body doesn't break it down like a normal person, 1 in 10 people. So it produces a craving for more of it, and so I keep drinking. So what would happen is your normal drinker might get a little bit anxious. You're putting poison in your body, right? You might react to it. You get a little anxious. You might get a little spinny, and it's your body saying, okay, that's enough poison in our body. You might overdo it and you get really hungover in the morning. You get sleepy, you get tired. You have consequences to it. And so those consequences, your body is telling you to stop doing that. My body says, let's keep doing it because we can't break this down properly. So if you put more in, we'll be able to muster up the enzymes to break it all down. And what happens is I keep drinking and I get more awake. So when I start to drink, it's like having 3 espressos. And so I'm just waking up at, we would go to a movie and you're going to the Tuesday night movie at the Cineplex Odeon and Eastside Marrows is right beside it. And it's 10 o'clock after the movie comes out. Let's get some wings and get a pint. And that's totally acceptable and normal. It's Tuesday, Wednesday morning's a work day. So instead of getting a couple pints or a couple bottles, I get a pitcher just because it's more consolidated, it's cheaper, and I know that I can drink a lot more than she can. So I'm going to have, 3 out of the 5 glasses in there, or 4 out of the 5.
And a half.
And so I can see that she's getting tired. And so I start to actually get anxious. And so then I quick buy another pitcher and 4 more shots, to split before we go home. But that produces this, I almost get chaotic. I almost start like hyperventilating because I know that we have to go home and I have to work and she's getting sleepy and it's going to be a big fight. And I actually want to wake up in the morning, but I have this craving inside of me that the more I drink, the more of a craving I get until I black out.
Wow.
And so that's what my problem is. It's all brain chemistry. And so when I look at the problem, I have to apply the solution to the problem. So my problem is 3 parts. I have an abnormal reaction to a substance being put in my body, all sorts of brain chemistry, an abnormal reaction like an allergy, which produces a craving for more. So if you have a peanut allergy, your throat swells up, all right, I'm not going to do that again. No matter how hungry I am, I'm not going to smoke any peanuts. And so you don't. And so if I just had this abnormal reaction of producing a craving for more of this drink, and if that was it, I'd be fine, because people can live on with allergies. They might take a little medication, but typically you stay abstinent from that subject, right? So the second part of it, which is the biggest part, is the mental part. Yeah. So I have a mental obsession for having a solution, which is the third part. So the third part is a spiritual sickness, which I think is common to mankind. I have this irritable, restless, discontent. I have this need to be comforted. I have this need for joy and comfort and ease, all this stuff. And when I drink, that's what gives it to me. And so about the reward system in my brain, it becomes more narrow and more narrow the more I drink, and the more that's where I get my solution from. And so after a year, my life has drastically changed. My parents are very concerned because the only way I can get ease and comfort is from this bottle.
Gotcha.
And so I have a mental obsession. I have broken thinking that says it wasn't that bad. It'll be different this time. Just try beer without wine. Like, who does that? Like, just don't mix them. Just don't bring your car this time. Just don't bring your credit card this time. And so I have all this stuff going on, which always leads me back to this. The other part, the mental obsession, is my brain won't shut off, which is what I need a break from. And this is now my reward, my break. And so I have this abnormal reaction to putting something in my body. I have a mental obsession, and I have a spiritual sickness. So 3 parts. And now I have the spiritual sickness, and I can put a spiritual solution in. And so that's what the program, 12-step program, leads us into, is actually dying of self and having God restore and revive and having a whole new life. And so things start hitting the fan. Vikki's like we got to get on track. All the behaviors, I have these bad behaviors. I want to change them. So I have to put this behavior in, and I have to stop doing this, and I have to really try not to bite my fingers, and I got to get the right amount of sleep, and you're putting behaviors on the symptom of the problem. And so they get involved, her and her friend get involved in a 12-step group, codependence, CODA, and going through the material, and then not being able to find somebody to take them through the 12 steps. And so then they finally sequester my services, which is like the most
expensive.
Like, no, this could end really bad, like really bad. Like, this does not seem fun at all. And I was like, let me consider it. And so I took all the material. I took all the material because I have to know what their problem is. And so I started investigating this. I have some people that we follow in the States that are associated with the medical system and rehab centers and that kind of thing. And so communicating with them and trying to figure out the problem of codependence, I'm looking at the material, and all I can find is behavioral. It's all these symptoms, and it's all these behaviorals, and it's about managing them. And so I was like, well, you can't apply the 12 steps. You can't apply this because we don't know what the problem is. And so investigating this a lot deeper, I found out that the problem for the codependent, for the chaos creator, for the fixer controller is actually out of all the situations that happen and how their brains work with overthinking and overcomplicating things and how they're wired. It actually produces the fight or flight response. It engages that. So there's shots of adrenaline. And so in the codependent, they have an abnormal reaction to the substance in their body, which produces a craving for more of it. And over the course of time, the dopamine, the reward center, that's what's rewarded. And so now you can't sleep, you're biting your nails, you're causing chaos, your brain is fixed to control and fix. And when you're fixing and controlling people, they retaliate, and there's chaos that is ensued in that. So I thought, and then you...
but you loved it when you were in active addiction.
Yeah, I believe that every good alcoholic or drug addict needs a great codependent. And so we lived in addictive relationship for, I would say 14 years.
Wow.
Even longer, yeah.
But we have this thing in recovery, and we ask God, what do you want me to be? So if I think I'm getting a little bit excited or resentful or jealous, I just sit down and I go, God, what do you want me to be? And so just recently, God just said, be in awe. Wow. And I think that's what I am is in awe, because I have a partner that was driving around sleeping at the steering wheel and being full of pain and hurt, but seeing her being awoken to the reality and then actually doing something about it, and just seeing her recover and get her energy back and get her, like, just really understanding and being awakened to the problem.
Well, and really, I think what really resonated for me is when John describes his addiction and like what happens with the physical, the spiritual, the mental obsession. I was always able to really identify with that. I mean, I was always able to listen in a meeting or listen to like that kind and say like, yeah, I have that problem. Like I have these tendencies that I just cannot stop. Like I can't not do this. And then in this time off of just being off work and my routine's changing or having zero routine, having like zero purpose, having like no obligations, having nothing, I should just be able to just rest and relax. And why can't I? And I can't turn off my brain. And so that's where, I thought I have a lot of respect for 12-step. I really do believe that, I've just seen how 12-step, it's promises that God has given us in the Bible. And the Bible says that I will be made a new creation. And the Bible says that God has all these gifts of fruits of the Spirit that he wants to bring to me. He wants, and he wants me to be patient and loving and kind and long suffering and all these things. And I can look at myself and say like, that's not how I am. That's not who I am, but that's who I want to be. I can want it as much as I want. I can pray for it. And then there's this, struggle of growing up in the church and thinking like, man, am I just not praying hard enough? Like, what's wrong with me? How come I'm not being healed? What's like, I must be in sin, I must be doing something wrong.
Wow.
I need to pray harder. And so that became a real struggle. But then when I looked at the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and really started looking at the book and the promises in the book and how it's a spiritual program that we and part of it in the very beginning, it says we do recover. And that's what Jesus said. Like Jesus said, you do recover. And Jesus said, deny yourself. And this year I began asking myself, like, when have I denied myself? And what have I denied myself? Like I have been going. And for me, it's been such an egotistical thing, which was so hard to admit. But years ago, I started to really realize how self-centered and prideful I was, because he was the addict and everybody would look at me and say, oh, you were so strong. You were so strong. How did you ever get through that?
Yeah.
And I would say, well, obviously I must have been a little crazy, to stay with someone like that, or obviously I have issues. But really, you know, I was really thinking, yeah, like I'm the only reason we still had a house. I'm the only reason. Look at me. Look how hard I worked. I always worked hard. You know, I kept this thing together and I made sure that our kids didn't get taken by CAS. And part of this recognizing like what is actually my problem is realizing that I have this fight or flight response to adrenaline that my addiction has become to adrenaline. I don't know how to not be around chaos. I don't know how to not have a project to fix. I don't know how to not try to control. And that's a really that's a really tricky word, because I would still even like today deny, like, I'm not trying to control you. No, I just really want what's best for you. I just really want, like, I just know that there's like freedom for you, and that really, if you would just listen to me, you would realize that there's a much better way for you, and it's my way. And and so here, let me just pin you down and help you no matter whether you want it or not. And so for me, so much of what I did looked good. And I think it's only by the grace of God that I had an amazing boss and an amazing colleague who were both really kind, compassionate people who gave me a lot of space to be crazy around them. And they would just like go in their offices. Some days, you know, I look back and I think, wow, there's so many times where I must have just driven them bananas. And
even seeing symptoms that are inside of her, like this high anxiety that she's always struggled with, and then me going like, it doesn't make sense, because somebody with high anxiety, wouldn't you do things to not make you anxious? And just to see like what she would do, I'm like,
I do the opposite.
You create anxiety. Like, why are you like, there's just little things like do your laundry, like little things that you create anxiety all over. Like, like, why can't you stop that? But the reality is that is a pattern to create the spikes of adrenaline. And so that's no different than me not being able to drink. Why can't you just stop drinking? Like, just stop it.
I remember, so this year when John was first investigating this, like, what's the codependence problem? Like, what's the root problem? Why are people codependent? You know, lots of people have written about codependency and nowadays, I mean, I think it started in the 70s, people started talking about codependency, and there's like, you know, rehab centers and all kinds of stuff for codependence. And so John was looking into this, and I remember the first time that I really started to realize what it actually meant. Because at first I pushed back against him, because I don't want you to try to fix me. I'm the fixer. So I had a conversation with someone, and she was calling to check in on me. How are you doing? And I'm doing fine. And I'm doing great. And this is going on. And that. And then I started listing. And I know that I've done this in the past where I would like list the issues or the problems going on in my life, the problems around me, or the things that were causing me like anxiety. And I would dismiss each of them as not a big deal. Even as I'm listing them, I'm dismissing them as not a big deal. It's just the collection of them. But yet I would like, why can't I get away from this like pattern of listing all these things? And so I listed on this phone conversation. And when I got off the phone, so there was some tears, I had a little, you know, cry. And I remember feeling like whatever was here, like I felt it like growing. And I just got more worked up. And then I was like, oh, Vikki, put yourself back together. And I was like, and God is in it all. And he's really teaching me, and I'm learning. And I just really trust him. And I'm so thankful for this time off. And and so I wrapped it all up, and, you know, she prayed for me. And then I started cleaning my office. I got off the phone. I started cleaning my office, which I never do. I'm organizing, I'm cleaning, I'm journaling. And I realized I'm like high.
Wow.
That's my high. So I have a little outburst. I have this like burst of adrenaline, or what did you call it? Adrenaline? Like, it's a little bit of chaos, you know, the chaos, the release. And I was like, now I'm like high in a way, right? That's my, and then I cleaned my office, and I journaled. And so I told John about that later. And then I think it was a week later.
I think it was like 2 days later.
Was it?
At night.
I was at night, and I had the list going through my head, which I can't turn off. And, you know, I had talked to my doctor. Should I go on medication? Like, what should I do? I just want to be able to sleep. I don't understand why I'm stressed. I shouldn't be stressed. I have literally nothing to be stressed about. And yet I can't turn it off. And she said, you need to exercise. And, you know, so she gave me a bunch of things to do. And then she's like, do these things and then come back to me. Well, of course I didn't do any of them because I don't actually not want to be stressed. But I didn't realize that. I was laying in bed trying to go to sleep. I'm listening and I could feel the physical sensation of the anxiety.
Wow.
And I could feel it like coursing through coursing through my body.
Yeah.
And it was in that moment that I realized I have lived for this.
Wow.
I have lived with this sensation my entire life and I don't know how to live without it.
Wow.
And I just said like, okay, God, I give it to you and you're going to have to do something. You're going to have to do something because I have taken courses. I have done so many things over the last 15 years.
Wow.
And I don't know what else to do.
And it's all behavioral management. And then you do all these things and implement them all. And then she doesn't follow through to create the chaos and it heaps more guilt and shame. And so you become in a hopeless state. And so adrenaline's a big deal. Like there's like pro MMA fighters. And you could have a world-class fighter, and if he comes too jacked up into the fight, into the ring, he can punch himself out in 30 seconds and lose a fight as a pro fighter. So imagine if you have that type of adrenaline in your body all the time, what that does to you, what it does to your inside, what it does to your skin, what it does to your mental capacity, what it does to your finger. There's a lot of things attached with having overadrenaline in your body all the time. And we heard a neuroscience talk about this idea of even social media, and you're on social media and it's $5 hits of adrenaline because they're impartial conversations, and if you're doing that all day long, partial conversations. Yeah.
Wow, this is pretty intense because, and this is why I wanted to have this conversation with you guys, is that I think the purpose of this podcast is to bring into awareness stuff that most of us don't think about. Hence why Inside Out.
It's a cool name because, you know, the hope that we have, the hope in a relationship with God, a hope of recovery, is that nothing needs to change on the outside. It all has to change on the inside. I need a new inside.
And this is a great conversation because what you said, and you've said it twice, multiple times actually, is this idea of behavior modification. It
doesn't work, and it leaves you worse off.
Well, and I think you can speak into this, is the guilt and the shame that's attached to what the heck's wrong with me. So you go through these, you know, programs, studies, and at the end of it, you're still dysfunctional.
Except now I have brain knowledge.
Exactly.
So I know what I'm doing wrong or should be doing differently or should be able to apply to my life. But I can't do it.
Which is the worst. That is kind of, you know, if you want to really
get stuck in the shoulds and.
But if you really want to punish somebody, that's a great way to punish somebody because it's. And this is, I think, most of the world lives in. This is that we have tons and tons of information available to us. Self-help there's an addiction to self-help. People actually are addicted to self-help
because you don't want to be reliant on God. Or you don't want to be reliant on something else. You're trying to fix yourself. You're trying to, like, I looked at it as, I don't know if you've ever used a ratchet wrench and a socket, but if you had a cracked socket, you can't even tell you have a cracked socket, and you're trying to unloosen a bolt, and it just slips, and it slips, and you keep trying to do it, and you don't want to admit that you can't do it, but you have a broken tool, and you're trying to fix something that you can't fix with that broken tool. And I was talking on Sunday about we have a creative hobby, COVID creative hobby. I actually picked for her. I thought like hydroponics would be a good creative hobby for her, and then she's like, that's dumb, and I'm like, I couldn't shake it, so I'm like, my creative hobby I'm picking is hydroponics, and so I want to be a herbologist. I want to be like one of those renowned chefs in my own kitchen, not in the real world, but I want to be renowned in my kitchen. Yeah. I want my wife. That's
you're a
chef John Ruby right there.
Chef.
And I have all my herbs like growing on. It's beautiful. And so what I did was I have lettuces, and the lettuces took off. And so now my lettuces are like overtowering everything. It's taking up the whole thing. So I put them in the back, and then they kept growing. And I was like, okay, I gotta get these out of here because who cares about lettuce? It's like just lettuce. You can't be known for lettuce. Like I want to be known for my spicy sage and my parsley and my whatever else I have in there. Basil is beautiful.
I like
a little
basil.
bit of dill.
Yeah.
Dill grows really quick too. And so I took out the lettuces. I have 5 lettuces. And when I took them out of the container, the roots were about that long.
Wow.
And so they just grow and float in the water. And so they're called water roots. And so what I did was I put them in cups and I put them outside and they would grow in the natural habitat. I come back in 2 hours, they're all wilted and faded. And I was like, I felt like I just destroyed my loved ones, my children. And I'm like, no. So I bring them inside. I had to do some research. And so my research said that it's a way to start the plant, but to continue it in soil, you actually have to have new roots. And so you can't put the old roots in, you can't put the old system into a new system. You have to get a new system for the new system to gain nutrients. So you actually have to get soil roots. So I had to keep the roots out of water into the air so they become air roots, and then I can transplant them after I think it was about 2 weeks. And I transplanted them in the soil, and now they're doing really good. So I think that's the illusion, is that recovery or a relationship with God and Jesus is that we add him to our life. We add recovery to our life to fix our life. But it's saying like you can't do this with the old life. It's not a fix, it's a new life. And it's like, I can't continue to have lettuce if I have water roots in soil. And so you actually need a whole new system. And so I think that's what God offers, is Jesus offers us the experience of carrying the cross. And basically that's dying of self to get a new life. And so that's the biggest weapon of the enemy is death. And that's what Jesus' promise is. I'll take that and make it look foolish, and it's actually our victory. And out of that death, out of your death, you have a new life.
Isn't that fascinating? Because it's so counterintuitive.
Yeah. It's
everybody is trying to keep
I didn't
their
see that
life.
coming. Like,
Everybody's trying to hold.
Yeah.
Everybody's trying to, protect. And yet the thing that frees you is you letting go of the very thing that you think is your identity in some ways. And so I often talk about this higher and lower identities. And lower identities allow us to kind of just live in survival world. We can survive. But if you really want to live a life that has purpose and meaning, there's an exchange that has to take. And you see this often even in a entrepreneur's journey. It's like, if you want to be that entrepreneur that's going to build whatever, a pretty big company, well, the guy that started it, often this happens to guys who are founders. They'll start a company, but the company grows to the point where they don't necessarily have the skill set. And so they have to actually relinquish the role, or they have to change. They have to become a CEO, because the skill set to start a company versus the skill set to grow a company is 2 different skill sets. And so in some ways, our spiritual journey is very similar in that you come into this world and you've got this life, and the first 5, 6, 7 years, we're getting lots of mixed messages, and that's really what's going to dictate the rest of our lives in the sense of the programming. And some of us are born in horrible environments, and so there's lots of traumas and so forth, so on, that we're carrying. And I think what you're saying, because you and I have a lot of similar character traits in the sense of the whole codependency thing. Because while you were journeying on this thing, I was going through my own journey. So, and funny enough, he's always in the middle of this stuff.
I know he was talking about me to you.
And he was talking about, I know, and that's the beauty of it. So what I love about John actually is that he has this ability to make things that most of us want to keep hidden. He brings it to light. And I appreciate my relationship with him, because he's allowed me to talk about things that I generally would have never talked about.
Right.
Because I would have just said, no, I'm going to process myself and be very private. But I think having someone like him who has had a very public recovery, and this is what he does all day, every day, if you're going to hang out with him, you better you better be ready.
Well, and I think a lot of people choose not to. I think a lot of people have been kind of scared away or just aren't ready maybe. And that's totally up to them. On our reading this morning, we were reading about denial and I loved how we read this Melody Beattie book together, and she was saying how she lived so much of her life under this warm blanket of denial. And then she was talking later in the reading about how it's not really our job to like yank the blankets off of other people.
No.
Like just leave them. But then on the other hand, what we can do is be a warm, safe place for them, and we can speak truth to people, when they let us, or
Permission.
and
yes.
maybe they won't let us, maybe they will walk away, and we have to respect that. But I think for John, he just can't, if we can just talk about you like you're not in the room.
Yeah.
Do it, man.
I think for John, he's always been we met, I was like 17, he was 19, and he would just like blurt things out, and he just also really saw things. And I remember really, really young, him saying to me, oh, you're friends with her? Like, don't trust her. Don't trust her.
Yeah.
I didn't think he even really knew her very well. And he's like, she's not really your friend. She's going to hurt you. And that was really interesting. I actually, to this day, can't remember what happened, but I do remember a moment of like, oh, wow, he was right. And how interesting that he would have seen that she wasn't trustworthy. And it wasn't about her being a bad person. It was just whatever it was that he saw in our friendship or in our relationship. He just saw that she was not trustworthy, which, it wasn't to badmouth her or anything. It was actually because I was very naive and very trusting, I think. And so I learned early on that John saw situations and circumstances different than I saw them. And I think I've spent a lot of my life not trusting that, or not, but trust isn't the right word. I spent a lot of my life, adult life, maybe shying away from it, like thinking like, oh, why do you have to be the person to say the hard thing? Like, why can't you just leave it be? Like, we just want people to like us. Can't we just like be people's friends? Like, why do you always have to say the hard thing? But the depth of relationship that we have with people who have been open or welcomed it, or maybe got over the initial like surprise that somebody would dare say that to them, like a hard thing. I think that depth of relationship, it doesn't come easily. And I don't know, because I'm such a people pleaser, I don't know how to create those kinds of relationships naturally. And that's something that for John, he would go to like a room full of people and sit and have a deep conversation with one person. And I would flit around the room and talk to everybody, which not wrong, just different. But he would spend like quality time with this one person at this party and come away saying like, that person's amazing. Like, you'd never believe, like, wow, what a great talk I had with them. And I'm like, oh, I had surface conversations with everybody. And I just totally went on a side tangent.
No, this is really cool what you're saying.
To me, like, I think that it is a challenging thing to have somebody who is willing to say like, hey, do you, like I said earlier about like how who's going to say like, oh, well, this is the reason that you don't have friends. Like, people have a really hard time being around you. And I'm like, oh man, like that's me. Whoever else would have been brave enough to say that to me than my husband.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Well, I'm excited for to me, it's like this revelation and this awakening and deepening. That was super simple. Of like what I've been involved in. Like, I've been involved in running a rehab and, being involved in tons of people's recoveries and over the last 10 years. And it's like, there's another half of recovery, and it's the codependent. And we never really paid much attention to it, but this is so simple. It's so simple. Like when the guy was asked to, like, when God went to heal the man and he had to go wash himself in the what was it, the Nile River, to become leper free. And it was so simple. And so I think God has made us simple enough, but we have this self-will. And I think that God, I want to write a book one day about being addicted to God. God's made us with the ability to worship him, but we go to created things for our ease and comfort and for our solution. If we just went to God because he's created us like that, to be able to be addicted to him. And, whatever I'm addicted to, I become. And so if I'm addicted to alcohol, I become alcoholic. Or if I'm addicted to people, I become a people pleaser and I become, it's very narrow. But if I become addicted to God, I worship God. Whatever I worship, I become godly.
Yeah.
And so that's how we were designed. And I think the medical has facilitated the separation of spirit and body, and so they just try to medicate the symptoms of spiritual sickness.
That's really cool.
Codependency is an interesting thing, though, because you can't actually be codependent by yourself. So codependence by definition is an inability to have healthy relationships.
Yeah.
And so part of the significant problem for us in the last years is that we had a rhythm of relationship it was a codependent relationship, and we were in it together. And then the further along he got in his recovery journey, then he's like, I can't function in this codependent relationship. Like, I don't need to need you, and I don't need you to fix me, and I don't want you to try to control me. And so it just became this challenge of like, shoot, I got to do something different, or,
But I think at the end of the day, any addiction will leave you alone, leave you isolated. And that's what the enemy wants. And so whatever we worship will actually be alone. So I think at the end of the day, the codependent, whether it's a woman or a man, will be alone and causing chaos inside of them, living off this adrenaline and having horrible habits and horrible relationships. And it's no different than the alcoholic. We usually die alone.
And isn't that interesting? Because I think part of my tendency would be like to take care of all these other people, and it distracted from my own pain, focusing on other people, and yet to think that like ultimately that could end with me being alone.
Not crazy.
So what I so deeply crave, I'm actually pushing away.
That culturally right now.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Because I like to take what's happening on a personal level, because at the end of the day, it's just a group of people. So a crowd is just a bunch of individuals. An organization is just, individuals. And so really the health of an individual is going to dictate the health of a society. And right now we have a lot of unhealthy people that are projecting a lot of their pain onto issues. They're trying to fix, the government. They're trying to fix it. I mean, if you go on YouTube, that's all you see is people engaging in conversation that really zero control over in some sense. But what you're stating, which is really powerful, is that the very thing that they're looking for, they're pushing away because of their unhealthiness and that disease that's eating them from the inside out. And it's very subversive because you don't see it. No one's talking about it. And that's why I think this is so powerful, that because both of you are, great leaders, high capacity, people follow you. It's really fascinating actually just to see, because I've gotten, I get the inside look of what you've been doing. I've been a recipient of your teaching. And so I get to see what's going on. And so I find it fascinating in that you can stay functional, quote unquote, for 15 years and still be very unhealthy. So what I'd like to talk a little bit about is that sometimes we measure things based on, outcomes. Like, oh, this guy built a great business. Look how much money they're making. Look how big their church is. But we never stop to see how they built it. And I think that's what you're getting to, is at the end of the day, is that you can still create through chaos and and all the stuff that we just discussed, that you can actually create something that it's a counterfeit. Yeah, it's not real, because in the end it's going to fall down. But yet you can still build something. So I guess, I want to talk a little bit about these people that end up building these big organizations, look very successful on the outside, but then they fall down.
What's an illusion? And I think sometimes our character defects and our addictions can actually propel us into leadership. And just narcissism alone, how many CEOs are narcissists, and it's like our illnesses can actually control and prove and drive us. But at the end of the day, how long is that going to last? And when I look at success, I think our culture says this is what success is. But when I look at that model or that perception of like the 10-hour day, this amount of money, these amount of houses and Winnebago and cars and holidays, but the 10-hour day work and the sleepless nights and the all the chaos. I'm working on the business, in the business, to me, that's stressful. Like that's not success.
No.
So what's the success measurement? The kingdom is about the impact. So what kind of impact can you have? What kind of impact as God comes into your mess and changes your roots and gives you a new life? What's the impact? What's the response out of that? And I think if God's truly changed you, then our only response is, how do I pass on that message? And so at the end of the gospel, it says, our job, our employment, because we have a new employer now, our employment is passing on the message. Our employment is going to make disciples. Our employment is feeding and clothing the poor and the widows and the orphans. At the end of the 12-step journey, as it says, as a response to this death of self, to this spiritual experience. Every spiritual experience that I've had is super painful, and it's a process, but there's an awakening at the end of it. And so even at this end of the 12 steps, as a result of this, having this experience and becoming awake, pass on the message.
Wow.
And that's our job. That's our response to having a new life
Wow.
in relationship with God.
Wow, that's really cool. So let's talk a little bit about Vikki.
Yeah, let's talk more about Vikki.
Well, no,
let's talk about your burnout.
My burnout. It's all over Facebook. Go read it. Chapter 1. I want to talk about the recovery.
So I just had a thought. Even earlier when you were saying something, and I just realized so early on, I feel like there was like safety nets that were strung out for us early on, even in John's recovery and in our walk, in our kind of as we headed into leadership, which I never wanted. I would say I still, that's actually that's maybe a little bit of a pride issue or a sin issue or whatever, but and something that I even have to confess and repent of to God is actually, I remember saying things like, why are we being invited to this pastors group? We're not pastors, whatever. You you work for a ministry and we're being invited to this pastors group, and I don't want this.
They just need the token crackhead. Eh?
And so
the guy that runs a rehab center, let's get him in here. This should be fun.
He's an unhealthy one.
Yeah, let's get those guys in. That'll be fun. Mix it up.
But we did go to this, we did early on, I can't even remember. I think it was 2008 or something, where we were invited to this 2-year commitment to journey alongside. We made a financial commitment. We made a time commitment of these many days. Every 2 months we would go away with this group, and they did intentional things with us. They did, personality types and money and fitness and health and friendship, and just walked through all these different things with us. And it was really intense at times. But, I just kind of really feel like God put out this safety net for us of almost these people are so messed up and they are going to need a lot of help. But I really feel a lot of it is God's protection too. Because when I look at, the weight of leadership, for me, I recognize that I operate from a position of defeat. And so my entire life has really been that way, where I am defeated before I even start.
Wow.
And so most of the time, why bother even starting? Because I'm not going to succeed at that, and I'm not going to be good at it, or I'm going to let somebody down. And so I might as well just not do it. That's been a real struggle that I just became aware of this year.
Wow.
And so I give up before I even really start. And so I think that for me, it's, it was so deeply ingrained in me to hide and to not be seen and to do. So if you do lots, then you're helpful, and you've created sort of an illusion. I created sort of an illusion of like, that I was really good at things and I'd be really good at helping, but then maybe you wouldn't actually really see me. And I didn't realize that I had carried that into the last 15 years. Like
wow.
I definitely operated that way in my family when I was growing up. I was really helpful. I was very useful. I was very loved. I know that I was very loved, but I definitely was really insecure and really struggled, and then did the same thing in our relationship of like, I can be really helpful, I can be really useful, and carried on this like, I'll just try to fix. And I never would have said that I was trying to fix him. Ever. I definitely was too smart for that. I knew that you shouldn't try to fix other people. I don't know how I rationalized it at the time, but it was a relationship that I could not walk away from. He would hurt me so badly, and then I would always take him back. And, I blamed it on him because he was so manipulative. It was never my fault that I took him back. It was always his fault. He was so manipulative, and he wouldn't leave and all this stuff. And he convinced me, and, never taking responsibility for anything ever in me. And so that has really defined almost my entire adult life. But in this weird paradox of yet being really good at things, like really good at doing, really, really good at doing, but it was really a distraction to keep you from really seeing me.
It's hiding.
Yeah, totally hiding. And there's been 2 friendships of people who just would not let me hide. John is one, but then 2 friendships of people who just really would not let me hide and really pursued me as a friend, and were able to, speak hard things to me, and kind and loving and gentle things. And so
Wow.
that's, I think the foundation of like recovery for me was set long before I ever knew that I needed it. It was, it was this group that we were part of like way back in 2008, before we even
Wow.
had this idea to start a church, which I didn't even know that was a thing that you could just do.
You can start rehab centers. You can start churches.
And
you
why
can
on
start
earth?
a kombucha business? Yeah, do
And
it.
maybe people could do that, but it certainly wouldn't be us, and it certainly wouldn't be me. Like, why would it be me?
Yeah.
I am, nowhere near qualified to do that. And so,
Wow.
but that's again, that position of defeat of like, why would I ever? And so I just constantly operate from this place of like, I don't deserve to be doing this, and I shouldn't be doing this. And, and so then how can I say that I believe that God is so big? And how can I say that I really trust him if I'm second guessing what he very clearly laid out? I mean, and he did. It's not something we went out looking for. It was, something that really was clearly laid out for us. And I could see it was something that we were supposed to do, and not something that we've done for like financial gain or notoriety or, who would want to be these people?
There's no financial gain.
Let's
That's fine. No, but
Let's just talk
doing
about
it
all our
our
issues.
way, I think we're farther ahead. Like I look at it and I laugh because it was a year ago. Like when we started church planting for 2 years, 4 years ago, we started church planting. We went down to 1 salary, and I didn't take a salary for 2 years just to get us going because we didn't need it. And doing it God's way, we have more abundance today without taking any salaries. Like I get a partial salary and she's down to nothing. And we've had more God's way than we would have had trying to do it our way.
But that really came from obedience and discipline too. Like I remember after John got sober, he filed for bankruptcy, and then we started going back to church. And I remember feeling like really guilty that he had filed for bankruptcy. That's wrong. Like, you shouldn't do that. We ripped off all those people. But then I remember really feeling peace and just thinking like, we are going to live without debt. we're not going to buy things that we don't have money for, and we're just not going to have debt. And then we struggled with money for a long time. We fought about money constantly. And so about
Looking back, it's all your fault because you're addicted to adrenaline.
Yeah. 10 years ago, we went on a budget.
Our lives make so much sense now. Like,
No,
you throw in the
all my
adrenaline.
fault.
Yeah.
John's literally waiting for this day for so long.
At least everything makes sense now, and it's like, man, it's so refreshing though.
You finally found another
not
addict.
in a condemning way, but it's like, oh, like I
Yeah.
totally get this now, and it's like
It's a dance.
it is, and we don't like I the story of Yosemite Sam and Bugs Bunny and Yosemite Sam shooting at the rabbit's legs and going, dance, rabbit, dance, dance. And it's like, that's not dancing. And it's like, we live this life, and it's
Wow.
like, there's parts of our lives that's not living.
No.
We're dying, and we're not doing it properly. And it's like, I think the process of recovery is a continual thing. And we can't get it all right away. It's too much. Our minds will just blow. But it's this journey that we get to go on with. The end is heaven, and there's no. It's not a destinational one. We're not ever going to. We just continue to grow and get stronger, and we hit plateaus, and then a spiritual experience happens, the pain happens, and then we become more awake. And
The Bible uses a fancy word for that called sanctification.
sanctification. Oh.
Don't get theologian.
You mean there's more to it than just getting saved? No.
But this is part of, I think this conversation is really centered about the role that we have to play. And often I think we think of our relationship with God or our relationship with each other, and we always look at how we're the beneficiaries or the recipients of something. So in a relationship, there's a marriage and you're a recipient of love and so forth, so on. And I think even culturally, we can speak about this. You know, if I'm a citizen of this country, I'm a recipient of a lot of amazing, healthcare. You Americans, sorry.
Amen.
We're recipients of a lot of benefits. So we're all beneficiaries of this relationship that we have. But often we also don't recognize, and I think this is what I'm learning in my own life, is that the role that we play also in that relationship. That if we're unhealthy and we're in a codependent relationship, for example, and I think lots of people are in a codependent relationship right now with the government, for example. Their expectation is that the government is going to solve all their problems. And they're running around getting mad, but they don't. This is just an illustration, a great one, because it's fascinating for me. There's this professor. I can't help myself take it there. That's just who I am. I got to take it to the culture, brother. Because I want people to understand that the impact of what's happening on the inside and how that manifests itself in culture and society. And I think we don't do a good enough job. We just look at things at a surface level, and it's very shallow. And so often we don't get to the root causes of why people do what they do. And so I'm always intrigued by that. But this guy is debating, I think, this issue of, I can't remember, it's privilege, as always. That wonderful. And so this kid is up there, is a university student, and he's telling this guy, like, the privilege of the whites specifically. And he's essentially saying that he was talking about reparation in the sense that they have to give back to, I guess, black people, whoever he was specifically speaking about. But he says to him, these are all the things that they've been robbed of. And he did a great job, And the guy listened carefully. He says, I agree with you. These acts were unjust and they were taken. But he goes, your solution is the government. And he says, what about your responsibility? Right now, you go to the best university in North America. Are you willing to give your position up so that another person... He called him on it because and this is the point, is that I think, and I'm learning this, responsibility. I had this really difficult call with my sister during this period of time that you were going. COVID's been a
beautiful thing.
It's a beautiful thing. It's been
a spiritual experience for so many of us. It's been an incredible experience. And it was around, I think, November, October, I was going through the same kind of similar realization that I've had this unhealthy codependent relationship. And it's another layer of revelation for me. It was going to take me to a deeper place. And I knew there was an invitation. And I remember God saying, be still, know that I'm God. There's an invitation to
kind of remove myself from the very thing that I, people and all that stuff, because it fed me and I loved it, and controversy and all that stuff, but it was like an invitation to kind of go deeper. And remember having this conversation, my sister, who's also a psychotherapist, so it doesn't help having a conversation with a sister as a psychotherapist, because she can call you. And she just started to kind of show me where I've not taken responsibility in my life. That I've always, and I thought I was always the guy who took responsibility. I mean, I preach responsibility, Yet to have that revelation and insight, to know that I was in these codependent relationships, whether it was my family or people that led me in all these things, was a humbling place to be. Because now I had to break a habit that I've been building for years, probably since I was 8 years old. That's not an easy thing to do. And so for me, the journey of recovery was, first of all, to go, I'm the problem. And not worry about anything else. So I couldn't say like, you're to blame, but there was no buts. Like I had to remove that. And I had to sit down with myself, which is not a really good place to be, and try to not have those lists, because I was, have all these things I had to do, but rather I had to stop and learn to be quiet. Oh my goodness. It was like trying to train a dog. Like every time I sat down, wanted to get up, or my mind was going, and it was the greatest fight of my life in that sense. And I've gone through, I've gone through drug addiction.
And that's exactly what played out with us is so to put it mildly, to put it bluntly, I was victimized by John many times in our relationship, just to use cultural language, which is fine. So uncomfortable for me. And I wanted, and I did not want to stay in that place. And I knew that I couldn't stay in that place. And I knew that I had to forgive him. And plus, I have to forgive him, and I should forgive him. And I'm not a good person if I don't forgive him. And I know that I'm not going to be free if I don't forgive him. And so I've forgiven him. And yet I still want to blame him. I'm still holding on to, but you did these things to me. And I was so much more subtle than that. I think maybe most of the time it was more subtle than that, but he's 14 years sober. Like it's been 14 years since it's been 14 years of him, being where he says he's going to be, and only looking at me, not ever hooking up with anybody else, and not coming home, and always coming home, and always providing, for his family, and never once saying, like you said in that example, like if I would say, well, you did all these things to me, he would say, I did. I did. And I'm, I'm so sorry. That was awful.
Wow.
And well, but you owe me. Like, I would never have really come out to say that, but on that same example, I'm looking to him to fix it and to make me feel better. Yeah. So okay, but fix it. Well, he's done all that he is responsible to do.
He done his part.
I'm responsible for the rest. I either choose to continue to be a victim and to act like a victim and to be the grieved wife and the I don't even know what the words are anymore, but the wife who got cheated on, or to carry all these hard, horrible things in these big heavy suitcases that I drag along behind me and then whack people with once in a while, or I have to choose to drop them and let them go. And I really did think that I had let them go. And so I never would have really realized that I was still playing a victim card sometimes. I would have never, I knew not to do that.
No.
But yet I could still say to John, you're not talking nice to me. You need to be kinder. You speak really, you just speak so brashly. I just wish you could be more gentle. I just need someone who's a bit soft sometimes, or I need. And it's so self-centered, and it's so me focused, and looking to him to make me feel a certain way. And if I don't feel that on the inside, there's absolutely nothing that he can ever do that will satisfy that whole inside of me.
Oh my god.
And that's a
And
good
he's done
definition
it.
of control. Like you're defining control.
That's so good.
Wow.
He's done it all. Like
Wow.
he's really I mean, he's been lavish, but it's in those moments of like, and I would nitpick at little, and I know I do it on, I can't not do it right now. Like there's just little moments, and you know, I would say, well, you're just really intolerant.
Like for example, no, last night, no, carry on.
For sure, there's an example last night, and I would say, well, why are you making such a big deal about it? If you just didn't make a big deal about it, why can't you just be the bigger person and just let it slip by you when I'm snarky? Let it just like overlook it if I'm a little bit snippy. Why do I want to stay in that place of being, you know, and not only that, but like, why am I so tense that I react to these little things, you know? And I thought I hid things so well. We think we hide. We don't. I mean, you think it's just on the inside. It's not just on the inside. It leaks all over the place. People see, or they don't see if they don't want to. But if people are looking and if people care, like they're going to see that something's wrong. And then they might try to ask, and you like push them away or slap them or with your words or whatever it is, or put up your mask. Or for me, I had this great picture years ago. I don't even remember. I've used it so often that I don't know where I got it from, but of that game at the X with the little mole heads that would pop up and you just whack them down, the whack-a-mole game. Whack-a-mole. That was me.
Wow.
I felt like I pulled it all together, that I went through life and I presented this certain persona of like, you know, this loving, giving, kind person, and then every once in a while, like just this little mole head would sneak up and I'd just like quick whack it down and nobody would notice. But
Meanwhile,
people
you're
notice.
just sitting at the whack-a-mole table day in, day out. No one's noticing. Just over here whacking moles.
And then how much am I making life about me instead of other people, when really I don't want to make life about me. I've never wanted to make life about me, but I've done the exact opposite of what I wanted in life.
I think that's the part of being recovered is, you know, we have to convince ourselves either God is everything or he's nothing. And we have this saying that people don't like in Alcoholics Anonymous, half measures avail does nothing. And so just putting in some fixes and doing some behavioral manages and relying on the promises of not doing something just is like doing nothing really. And so what's the point if I'm only going to do half the job, because it's like I'm doing nothing.
Yeah.
And then it's the illusion of, well, I did like 80%. I still have this little corner that's mine.
Yeah.
But you may as well just not give anything because you have to give it 100%. And so I think that's a process of, I love that warm blanket example of creating safe environments for people to take off the blanket of denial so that they can actually see themselves. And so how do we create space for people to derobe, to be warm enough? Oh no, it's a blanket, not a bathrobe. But how do we create environments that are safe? Like, because change, we have to accept change. Everybody hates change, but we have to accept change. Especially COVID, like every second day something's changed.
Safety is a trigger word for me right now, though, because in society,
it's being used in
being
a very
safe, it's being used in such a way of like
fragile.
Of like, well, not only, don't. Joe, you'd probably word it better.
Here,
what
let me. I think often, and I've been thinking about this. Words that used to have meaning have been robbed, and words like safe places, safety. What we think of that is creating an environment in which a person in some ways lives in a bubble. So that's why I use the term fragile, because the idea is that this person is so fragile. As a black person, I think of this because often people think, because of what's happened to black people, that I'm fragile, that I need to be handled with kids' gloves, and that people can't say funny things. My closest friends, we say everything and anything. Why is that? Because they don't treat me like somebody who's going to lose his mind because they've said something insensitive, because there's trust that's built in. And so when we think of safety, I think of the word home often, and I think of the word salvation actually. That word salvation means home. And home, I always think of a place where you're so protected that you can be. My kids are like that. This is fascinating. I remember when Jade came and he'd get all these great reports from teachers. They're like, man, they're amazing kids. They don't use bad words. They don't do anything. I'm like, that's not my child. Like, so one day I sat down with him and I said, Jade, how come, you're like the perfect student at school, but you act out, you do all kinds of crazy things at home? And he said, because mommy and daddy love me. That's safe to me.
We asked his parents at their 45th wedding anniversary, what kind of advice would you give to us? And that was a while ago now. And they said, often people will say that like in marriage, you save the worst for each other. But she said, we really believe that in marriage, you're there to rub the rough edges off of each other. And to me, when I think of a safe relationship or a safe friendship, it's someone who's willing to help me rub those rough edges off to go out into the world.
So good.
And that's what my mother-in-law was saying. Like,
wow.
We rub the rough edges off each other so that we can be better people to go out into the world. And I think that's definitely who John has been for me. When I think of safety, for me, doesn't mean that you're never going to say something that hurts me. It means that if you hurt me, I can come to you and say, like, you actually you hurt me. That was really hurtful. And that the safest thing I can be for someone is to say, I hear you. What happened? What did I say? What did you hear? Where were we? Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry.
That's it. That's the safest
I would
thing.
never want to hurt you.
Yeah, that's so good. Because go ahead. No.
I just want to ask John, when you think of safe, what do you think of when you think of that? Like create a safe
place
for people to remove their blanket of denial. What does that
mean?
I need another kombucha for that one. No, I think it's a place of acceptance of it's okay to cry, it's okay to scream, it's okay, but you need to change. It's like this, not this expectation, but it's like we're all growing and we want to change and we want to be changed by God, and it's not going to be comfortable, but it's going to be safe because we've all been changed and transformed and we're in different spots of it. And so I think we really need to be vulnerable with our stories, and we really need to have space for story and testimony and just saying like, I'm a mess and everything, it's not okay, and I'm hurt and I'm in pain and God's taking me through this, and this is, just being able to share our stories, which actually brings other people into the story to be able to be changed and transformed as well, because that's really hard of taking off the blanket, so we can give space for that by sharing story, by sharing experience, by not fixing, not controlling, not like even in church, I'm very sensitive to little things like even, culturally, in church, we do things that are very controlling from the front. Like, please stand up. It's like, I don't know if I want to stand up.
Exactly.
Like, I'm not having a good day and you're making me stand up, and now I feel like I'm being disrespected. Like, that's not a safe place, because I might not be in a place where I want to stand up right now. Yeah. And I don't really like the authority that's telling, like, so how do we create safe spaces of just giving people permission to be here how you are, and being okay with being able to sit down or being able to cry or being able to
disagree,
not be okay. Yeah. So then we
make mistakes, to know that like our leaders are going to make mistakes. Our pastors are going to make mistakes. Our parents make mistakes. Our friends make mistakes. Our bosses make mistakes. And if we create an environment where like it's not okay to make mistakes, people hide.
That's why people don't think it's safe.
Yeah.
So then they go, okay.
People hide and they pretend, but then they're not being real and they're not being truthful. And that's the hardest thing for me is like if I'm trying to guess what you mean, or if I'm trying to guess what you're thinking, or what you know, that you're not being honest, I will just pull away.
Yeah, and that's what cancel culture's done. It's created an environment in which people don't feel safe, so they think they're going to get fired if they say the wrong thing, And so what you do is you create a culture where you can't really have real conversations. And so the issues that actually need to be addressed publicly. So in the old days, I think we knew and understood debate because people didn't attach their self-worth to an idea. So if I had a good idea or a bad idea, nowadays what we've done is we've made ideas part of people's identity. So if I belong to a certain party or political party or belief system or idea, my identity is defined by the idea. But ideas are just things that we like. The reason we have the culture that we have is because, like in science, often I could have a hypothesis of whatever. It has to be tested, and then I can present a study, but it has to be peer reviewed. Why is that? Because it has to pass a certain amount of what I would consider, I think, some testing to see the validity of that belief system as an idea. And often I think in our culture today, people's identity is so wrapped in whatever belief system that they hold on to. Well, I'm learning this about myself right now. The stuff that I used to believe in my 20s, well, I don't believe anymore because I've grown. I've got, it's what you were talking about, this idea of awakenings. You have different moments of awakenings. As a 25-year-old, the stuff that I was thinking was in proportion to my level of understanding of the world that I live in. But now as a 47-year-old with 3 kids, I think differently because I'm thinking about the next generation. I'm thinking about creating a culture that we can all coexist in. And so often I think what you're speaking of, this idea and this concept of safe, what I hear in our culture nowadays, safe is this: I got to be with a group of people that think and behave, look like me. That's
well, and our culture says that pain and suffering is a source of shame and embarrassment, and so you always put your best photo forward first. And it's the question that I think our culture has is what will bring me happiness, what gives me the most joy. And so culture is seeking happiness and joy out of created things, all these things that give me joy, and there's no real purpose behind it, but at least I'm happy, or I have all my stuff, and if there's any suffering, then I just hide it. And it's like, you're not happy in your marriage, so get divorced because that'll make you happy. You're not happy right now, and you're really hurting your kids. But I don't know any kids that said, like, I'm super glad my parents got divorced. It's like that we don't want to have any pain or suffering. We don't want to go through anything because it's an embarrassment. It causes me shame. It causes our culture shame. So then when you come into a safe community, it's all about exposing my vulnerability. It's all about being vulnerable in front of people, which brings people out of the shame that their social media has created this nice, pretty picture. And so that, I think, is our culture's cry, is what the question is, what brings me the most joy? How do I get happiness? How do I live this life and do it so great that it's consumeristic. Like, we consume, our culture is based on consumption. And so the whole consumerism of stuff. But look at data. I remember data maybe 5 years ago, it was like 20 gigs at your home.
Yeah.
And that was like, man, if you got to like, and now they don't even sell data without it's always unlimited. There is like, who buys data that has a cap? Because you have 10 things in your home that is consuming data, and we're so built to consume, and we consume other people because really we need to be happy. We need to have joy. And so I think that's people that come into the treatment center, people that come into church, it's how do I have ease and comfort? Well, we get that through a relationship with God. Because that's what God offers. Yeah. And so when I die of self, that's what the gospel is. Wow. It's the good news.
Wow. So good.
So creating safe places, I think the key is just sharing our experience, our story, our being vulnerable, and giving permission for those stories to happen.
Yeah. And this is so good because I love where this conversation has come to, because it's come to the part where I think all of us are afraid of showing our ugly parts because we think that that's the cover, that's the shame. You know, it's like Adam, when he sinned, the first thing he did was he covered himself with fig leaves. Why? Because he came into an awareness of that the defects. That sin immediately says you're not good enough. And so then we find, and I think this is what the conversation centered around, is we have all these really bad solutions, these bad
which is so funny. I met a woman who actually grew up in Texas, and as kids they used to climb fig trees.
Okay.
And they would come with like big rashes because fig leaves actually will make you like really, really itchy.
Wow.
You will react to them. And so it's really funny that it's fig leaves that they covered themselves with in the Bible. That's what we do. We try to cover up the stuff inside of us, or it
causes us to be irritable, restless, and discontent, and we look for a solution from this world.
Yeah.
From a bottle, from a person, from
food,
whatever.
spending.
Food, yeah. Power, prestige, work, money, retirement, safety, all of those things. Yeah.
And so what you're saying is the solution to the problem, whether it's drinking.
Yeah, like in Sunday school, the solution is always Jesus. It's like,
which is
it's the truth, but what am I applying
what
it to
does
my
that
problem?
mean,
What does
though?
that
How
mean?
does
What does
that-
that practically mean? What does that physically, practically, emotionally? What does that mean? And so that's what we see in the Bible. We see all this stuff, and it's like, you know, it's like, what does that actually mean? Like to walk in the Spirit, like to live in the Spirit. What does that mean? Like, there's no real, like, I don't, and I think that's part of discipleship. So I think part of what we want to do is bring people in, but then what does it mean to come into relationship with God? Because I really feel like we have a responsibility to lead people into a relationship with Jesus. And it's not forceful. It's not like this is what it is. It's our job is to lead people into the relationship with the creator that has all the answers. I try not to answer certain questions because I think a lot of the time people want to discredit the church or discredit God. And it's like, if you want this particular answer, I can lead you to the person that can answer. Are you willing to go on that journey? No. That's cool. I just want to like cause it. Yeah. So I think that is, I think that's important to really, what was I saying? Where was I?
We don't want to try to be other people's solution.
Yeah.
I can't be your solution.
That's it.
Our church is not going to be your solution. You know, getting a better job is probably not going to be your solution. And so for me, let's talk about me again. For me, just taking this time off work and realizing like, I don't know what's going to come next. I have no idea, you know, one of us is going to have an income. And so, but for me, I can't figure all that stuff out today. So for today, I need to do what's put in front of me. And for today, that's just doing the work to learn how to surrender to God and to recognize that actually I'm trying to run this show and I'm not very good at it. I really have a proven track record of doing a crappy job at running my life. That's
so
really
good.
what it comes down to.
That's so good. And that's the concept of dying. That is the death. Is, you know, pride is the issue ultimately, is to say it's denying, you know, the power. And I think often we deny the actual power that has the capacity to transform us. And then we take the, you know, the stuff that is more, it looks great on the outside. It manifests itself in certain things that we do. And people look, oh, wow, this person is very spiritual because he's doing A, B, and C. But really, we're denying the very power that actually transforms us and brings us. And I think this discussion is the fact that often, and one of the biggest lessons that I learned, I think, through Life Lab is these debilitating barriers that we put on, you know, that we, because of really bad solutions. We think, oh, this is the great solution. But all it does is it acts as a barrier. And so then ultimately we have all these barriers. And then we go, oh, God doesn't exist.
Well, I think we can get stuck at it because I'm a botanologist, a herbologist, like a plant expert. I think we're all born as seeds, and it's like we need to be planted and die, and that's what Jesus has a great parable about that. Unless a seed goes into the ground, it can't die and then produces fruit. So I think we get stuck in I'm safe here in my little cocooned, don't put me in the ground, don't bury me. But that's how we were designed, for a greater purpose, a way better purpose, and to bear fruit.
Amen. This is so good. Great way to end it.
Oh, is this the ending, man? We didn't even we didn't really talk about kombucha, ashes to ruby.
Well, you know what?
Come on, man.
Listen,
we're
bud,
just getting warmed
It's
up.
not about you, John.
You
dinner
will
time?
come back often.
All you
on
have to
this.
say is dinner time.
We have way many conversations to have.
COVID-15 over here.
We'll talk about kombucha and the social enterprise and ashes to
We just
rubies
drank
and
kombucha. So
we did
I
have,
think
and anybody wants to pick it up, you can find these guys on the website, Facebook, everywhere. Just
everywhere.
wherever you go, I seem to see them everywhere. But this is an incredible drink. It's my beer, so I love the fact that as somebody who doesn't drink, I got something that's fizzy and healthy. This is like a promo right here. I just did a promo.
I feel
for
like you are promoting.
I just
right
plugged
now.
this thing
I think
hard.
you're plugging hard.
This is a plug.
CarlingtonBooch.com.
I think Carlington Booch
Order
should
yours
sponsor
today.
this. That's what I think. This
It's
podcast is sponsored to you by
everybody's
Carlington
drinking
Booch.
Booch in this room.
So we're gonna. I think
You got
we
a bunch
found
of people with smiles on their
I think we
faces
found
behind the
ourselves a
camera.
sponsor right there. Yeah, I love these guys, man. James and Sham. Sorry, I almost forgot. I was gonna call him.
Do like podcast shows actually have sponsors? Like
Yeah. Do
Man,
you ever
why
listen?
can't Carlington?
Joe Rogan has
Hey,
like
you're
10
sponsored.
minutes of sponsors.
Oh, I know.
Like
You know.
We skip them.
we
No,
skipped them.
no.
I know.
I've been looking at fire cooking devices. They call them barbecues, and this one in particular device is it puts smoking is a device, and barbecuing with flames on the bottom into one. So it has pellets that feed in and burn in the bottom. And so all my reviews were horrible. And then Joe Rogan's talking about this, and I'm like, I'm ready to spend $1,000 to buy this barbecue smoker thing.
Wow.
And I'm like, yeah, no, I think they work. So I would be honored for Carlington Booch to somehow sponsor. I don't know what that means.
Well, we'll figure that out. My lawyers will call your lawyers.
Like somebody's getting free
Yeah.
kombucha.
That's all I care about. Really, that's what I want.
All of our sponsorship includes is a little bit of free kombucha.
I love free kombucha.
That's what we have to offer.
On a serious note, you guys have been a godsend, I know, to myself and to my family. And it's always fun in some ways to meet somebody at your lowest. Because then you got context, you see where, and so just to see how far I've come in my own personal life in the past 2.5 years, 3 years, whatever it's been now. It's just been incredible, and I've learned so much. And so I thank you both for.
Are you thanking me for sicking my husband on you when you were hiding?
Yeah, when we were hiding.
I literally did that intentionally.
I bet you
I remember
did.
thinking he's hiding.
Oh, I was hiding.
And I remember thinking my husband loves that guy.
I know.
I've only ever heard him say like amazing things about you. I was like, oh I'm so telling my husband.
And
I'm sorry. I just
thank
was
you
like
so much because I was so
I
angry.
wouldn't come for coffee, but chicken wings all of a sudden. He's like, where? What?
Well, I'm coming.
That's in my calendar.
No,
We
I
love you
was
guys.
so mad at my wife because I thought, of all people, John Ruby. This is a
Of
guy who's going to call me
all
out.
people.
So
I know.
that
I think
was-
my second question, I said, have you ever thought of using drugs or alcohol again? He's like, whoa, you're the only one that's asked me that.
that he gets right to
I
the
bet.
heart of the matter. He's like, it's so, and I said to you, no, but I've thought of killing a few people. That's, I think
So and then that's where we do such a disservice to the people around us when we aren't real, because we can look in the media and think, how could that high level pastor take his own life? How could he do that? How could this person over here, overdose on drugs? Like, we're just so shocked. But yet we we aren't willing to provide this vulnerable place for people to not be okay.
You just define safe right there.
Yeah.
Safe is a
Really.
place where people can come and still not be okay, and that's all good.
And the reality is that we can create the safest environment possible, and we will still lose people. And it's not our fault.
No.
It's not my fault. It's not our fault. It's not my job to save people. We each have to take responsibility for our own life, and some people will succumb. We talked on Sunday about, the enemy's greatest weapon is death. And sometimes, unfortunately, the enemy does win.
No.
And that's the way it's going to be until Jesus comes back.
Amen.
But we have
But
to.
God turns everything into the good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have to
I'm
keep,
sure of that.
Yeah.
And COVID, like, this has been, I think it's been traumatic on a lot of people. We went downtown all the time, and just to see the barrenness, no one's there except the homeless shelters, and like to see what's going down there now, it's like a war zone.
Yeah.
The drugs and the chaos and the like, wherever there's a crisis, there's going to be people getting taken advantage of. There's going to be things that are brought out that you never saw before, deficiencies. And so we're seeing a lot of deficiencies, and even like just what we're going through. And either you can go through it and lay down in green pastures and let God refine and come and nurture and grow so that you can get up and be strong.
Yeah.
I think that's what we're in that time right now. So as a builder, I'm super like, I have like my biggest thing would be insecurities right now. Is as a builder, I'm not building nothing.
Yeah.
And I've been told like we're not doing nothing.
Yeah.
Until and there, whatever happens at the end of this, if there's no church, no camp boot, I know that I still have a relationship with God, and we're strong together, because that's what God does. He joins two. And so now we get to really be strong together instead of, I work on all of this stuff and I'm in rehab and you're on the hill. Now we actually get to be one together and heal together and grow together. So I'm excited about what happens.
So good.
But I have no clue. I have no clue what's going to happen. But God's going to turn it all into the good and for his glory.
What a
Amen.
moment. Amen, brother. Thank you.
Pass the booch.
Pass the booch. That'd be a great church to go to. You're preaching it. Well, anyways, guys, so thank you for joining us, whoever was watching this and whoever will watch it in the future. But you can catch these guys every morning on YouTube. They're on Facebook too. Yeah. And you can see their journey. They're very open and transparent, and you can see them fight. So it's kind of cool.
Ashes to Rubies.
At Ashes to Rubies.
Facebook, YouTube, AshesRubies.com.
You got so
whatever.
many brands.
We got some
I
clothing.
Can't keep
We
up
got
with
some
you.
drink. We got it.
But on a serious note, if you're going through stuff, especially addiction, mental health stuff, and you need somebody to talk to, these guys are the most incredible people. So reach out to these guys or to the community, and they're more than happy to connect you to somebody that will help you.
Don't go through it alone.
Exactly. That's it.
You are not alone.
You're not alone. Anyways, love you guys. Peace. That was good. That was, wow. Bravo, guys.
Last one was an hour 41.
Really?
40 something.
How long?
By minutes different.
We hit a pocket there where I was just like, wow, when you got into that safe thing, I really felt like you hit something really powerful. It was so good. It was really good. It's very layered. Did you enjoy that? That was good.
Yeah, it was good.
I was like, because I'm just listening, so I kind of lose myself in the conversation, and I'm like, I'm actually like really lost in this conversation right now.
I'm very invested, so it's like it's my life, so it's good to me. I'm like, whatever.
I think it's so powerful.
Yeah, it was a fun conversation. It was very different. Usually it's about what we do, and this is about how we be. Like
That's what I
we're
want
at.
this to be. I want it to be more about